Hello everyone and welcome to this video, and today I'm going to be doing an album review. I'm going to be taking a look at this record here. It is by China Crisis. It's called Flaunt The Imperfection. So I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, showing you my vinyl copy, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So this review was, well, not requested, but kind of like inspired by like a kind of like discussion I was having like with like James Griffiths. He's got a really great YouTube channel, like I will link it in the description, and he basically just messaged me asking like if I was familiar with this album, and like of course I was, like I had the album and like I rather liked it, but like it'd be like a little while like since like I'd kind of like played it, like so like yeah, it was just like his message. Like I thought, right, I've not done a China Crisis video at all, so I thought yeah, might as well make a video on them reviewing one of like their albums. So this was their third album, released on the 29th of April in 1985. Now by this point the band were already quite well established with a couple like of hit singles and like moderately successful albums. So they originally had started out like as a duo of Gary Daly on vocals and keyboards and Eddie London who played like guitar, like so initially like a duo, but then like they expanded like the band lineup like to consist of Gary Johnson on bass and Kevin Wilkinson on drums. He was former drummer with the Waterboys. Like, and I think that when China Crisis broke up, like he became a pretty well-known like session drummer. So for this album, like they worked with Walter Becker like as producer. Like he was the distinguished guitarist with Steely Dan. Now Becker had apparently heard their previous album, Working with Fire and Steel, and had been so impressed that he had actually requested like to work like with like the band, and like then like the band like were big fans of Steely Dan and like were like very keen like to like work with the Steely Dan's producer. Like I forget like his name, like, but like they were wanting to work like with like with the person like who produced like the Steely Dan albums, but then like the record company said like we can go one better, and we've got Walter Becker like who's wanting to work like with you. So yeah, it was a really nice story about how they kind of came together to be working like on this album. And yeah, while on the surface they kind of like the collaboration does seem a little bit of an odd one, a kind of Liverpool kind of post-punk synth pop band collaborating with like an American titan like of like sort of like jazz rock, like, but there's a lot of similarities there between like the two bands. Both groups, like both Steely Dan and China Crisis, very much not like image conscious at all. Like, you know, like they were like they didn't like being like front and center like of like attention, and they created very like sophisticated music that's like with a lot of like attention to detail in there, with also a lot of like slightly abstract lyrics as well. Now Becker's involvement with the album would be so great that he was formally listed as a band member like on the album as well as producer. However, he didn't make any like in-person appearances like with like the group, like either live like or like to like promote the album. And he would later though return to produce their fifth and final album. I forget what that one's called, but that was slightly later in like the 80s. So this would be China Crisis's most commercially successful album. It reached number 9 in the UK, staying on the charts for 22 weeks. Critically, it was also acclaimed, with many seeing it as a significant step up in terms of like their like maturity. So I'll just show you my vinyl copy of it here, just as just a basic UK original pressing of it there. So you've got the track listing and a nice cover, and then inside you've got a custom inner sleeve there with lyrics and some pictures of, I think they're supposed to be the band members, but it's very hard to make them out again, like those photos there, and then more lyrics on the other side. And then the record just looks like so. So you've got a white label on one side and then a black label there on the other. So yes, that's the vinyl record looked at. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album songs in detail. I'll score each track out of 10 and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. John the Boxer is brave now, fill the gap. And it begins us for me with possibly my least favourite song on the album, which is a bit disappointing, like, to kind of start off the album with a song which you're not maybe crazy about. But yeah, the highest high for me is possibly like my least favourite, like, on the album. I mean, it's decent enough, like, it's a pleasant track, and I guess like, lyrically could be about kind of like regeneration, like, or like kind of like loss, like, of like a like community, and kind of like that sort of thing. So he sings like, where is my town, the place I love, where I can stay for all of time, don't knock it down or build it up, this is my home for all time. And then later says like, fight the fight for what is yours. And it's possibly about like kind of like that sort of like thing. And like I mean, I got like 80 songs that weren't about kind of like places getting like demolished or kind of like regenerated. Thinking like XTC's Ball and Chain is quite a kind of like other like obvious like example. But yeah, for me, it's just not a brilliant, it's just not a standout track in terms of music, and I think it's just a rather average start to the album. So it would get a 7 out of 10 there for the highest high. Next up is a really great, it's called Strength of Character, and this for me is when the album really gets into its stride. Starts off with a very sophisticated drum pattern. It sounds a bit policey, this one, a bit like the Police and Stuart Copeland's kind of drumming style. So it's got a kind of slight reggae like influence like in there, and like apparently like when like I was like researching like for like this review, that like Wilkinson played it flawlessly like first time like round, like, which even like the perfectionist like Walter Becker like felt like couldn't be like improved upon. Like, he was like notorious like in Steely Dan for sort of like making drummers like re-record like all like their parts, but he was so happy like with like this like with like this first take that like that's what he used, which is like really quite something. And as for the song itself, it's really catchy. I really like the chorus, like that that bit like where it goes like, you really don't need sympathy, forever in danger, whatever we see. It's a nice chorus, it's a nice catchy song, this, but really like quite soft, but like really good though. So I really like Strength of Character, and that would get a 9 out of 10. Next up is called You Did Cut Me. Now, this is another decent song. I believe this was one of the singles issued from the album, but I don't think it did too great in like the charts. It's quite a smooth song, this. You've got a nice saxophone part on it and a very kind of silky, kind of soulful like guitar riff. But for me, it's again, it's a solid song. Good sort of harmony vocals like on like the chorus, but it isn't one of my favourites like on the album, like I would say, but it's still a good song, so it would get an 8 out of 10. Next up is Black Man Ray. Now, just today I actually picked up the 12-inch single for it here, so I'll just show that here. This is a good song, I think. This was the lead-off single, reached number 14 in the UK charts, and I mean, it is a nice song, this, but again, never been one of my favourites. Like for me, like even like kind of like knowing that they're kind of singles like predominantly, this is a song which I've never really not that I've not cared for it, but just that it's never been one of my absolute favourite singles. If I was to do a top 10 songs of theirs like this one, like I'd be very doubtful like if like it like would make it, but it fits nicely like on the album though, and I think again it is a good song, so for me would get an 8 out of 10. Next track up, which closes off side one, is called Wall of God. Now, this was the first song for me like on the album which I really got into. Like I can't remember why it was this song which just clicked to me, but I remember just thinking, wow, that's a really good song. And I mean, it is. I mean, it's in kind of multiple sections, this one, so you kind of got quite an interesting structure. The verse is a lot more upbeat. It's got kind of propulsive kind of beat to it, and then like this, and it's got kind of it's the synths are quite bouncy, and they kind of like it's quite fun and like upbeat, but then the kind of like the chorus kind of like everything kind of fades out, and then you've got like it's almost, again, it's a bit like that. It's a bit like the drumming, like on Strength of Character, a bit policey, like Stuart Copeland style drumming, like there, like on like the chorus. So I think the contrast between the two sections works quite well. I mean, it's a bit long. It's well over 5 minutes, this one. So I think they maybe could have trimmed it down, and if they had trimmed it down, I think would have made a decent single like from like the album. But it's still a good song though. And yeah, Wall of God for me would get a 9 out of 10. Next one up, which opens up side 2, is called A Gift of Freedom. Now this is another upbeat song, and again, lyrically it's quite interesting in the sense that it manages to be quite political, but also very subtle, like in like a very kind of subtle way, which is like you kind of like listening to it, and like you can just listen to this like as like an easy listening kind of like fun kind of like 80s sort of like synth album, like, but like then like I mean like some of like the lyrics are quite like kind of pointed, so he kind of sings with it like, "I no one dare justify shock policies, run a river dry, and will this whole damn world fall down before we've learnt to share what we've found." I mean, possibly about the kind of like the Thatcher government, like off like the time. And I just think musically it's really well put together. You've got nice use like of like kind of horn like in like the break, although I think it's probably as a synthesizer, but it just keeps the song interesting, and it kind of like is again it's a fun upbeat song, but lyrically maybe a little bit more on the kind of serious side, which is what I quite like. So yeah, for me, Gift of Freedom would get 9 out of 10.
The residential Black Sea band, they rose about on the sinking.
Next up is King in a Catholic Style. Now this was another one of the singles from the album, and I think is like the best of the singles like which like were chosen, like without a doubt. It begins with a really hooky kind of synth riff. Apparently like that was like a contribution like of like Walter Beckers, and it's just a very playful song, this one here, but yeah, just really fun, and again really well produced though. So yeah, it's classic China Crisis this for me, and we'll get a 10 out of 10. Next up is another favourite of mine on the album. It's The Bigger the Punch I'm Feeling, and this is again a very sophisticated track, like on like the surface, but also just really catchy. Like I do like that kind of like that combination. Again, it's delivered like in like a very kind of like soulful way. And again, lyrically, I'm not too sure what this one is about, but I do like that. I do like the chorus line, like which goes like, "All of my life, it's as sharp as the bigger the punch I'm feeling." And yeah, just a really good song like for me, and really well like executed, great production on there as well, a lot of like interesting sounds I think, like on it. I think there's a bit of like a backwards guitar like in there possibly, but just a really well done, really well executed song this. So yeah, for me this one would get a 10 out of 10.
But I cannot make no sense of it.
Another great track now is World Spins and I'm Part of It, and yeah, this is a great song which you can really tell on this track the Walter Becker influence. I'd say this is the track which is possibly the most Steely Dan like this one, or possibly The Bigger the Punch I'm Feeling. Yeah, again another really great song, this very catchy chorus like that, like where it goes like, "But I cannot make no sense of it, and should I try, the world spins, I'm part of it, I wonder why." Great chorus, and yeah, just an all-round really, really good song there. So that one will get a 9 out of 10. Then the album closes up with a song called Blue Sea. Now this is a slightly more different song like on the album. It's sung by Eddie London on this one here instead of the usual like Gary, and it's a little bit lighter this one in terms of like its lyrical content. I think it's like 3 kind of short verses, so it kind of is structured like slightly differently, but it's a really good kind of mood piece almost. A lot of nice guitar work on it, and again it just gradually fades away, which is quite nice. Again, not what I would pick out as a highlight on the album, but a good song here though, and we'll get an 8 out of 10. Okay, so overall this album would score 87%, so I really, really enjoy this record. I think it's certainly a lot more smoother and more relaxed, and less jarring than their first two albums. And I mean, I suppose it's maybe a bit difficult to say whether I preferred this or those earlier albums. I guess some days, if you caught me like in a bad mood, I could perhaps say this is a bit too smooth and a bit too overproduced. But like on other days, like when I was writing like up like this like review, like it's exactly that kind of like that sophistication that I really like and like really appreciate. It's very well crafted, and it doesn't sound too dated at all either. Again, although there is a lot of synthesizers on here, I think the way those have been teamed with more natural instruments like really like is like a winning formula. And it's also structured quite interestingly as well in terms of like its track list, because for me it gets progressively better, this album, like as it goes on, which I think is a great quality like for like an album to have. I mean, not many albums do that, because a lot of records start with the singles and then like the back end like of the album like is all the fillery tracks, whereas this one it's almost like the opposite a little bit. Like for me, like even like some of the singles are some of the more underwhelming songs, but then like towards the end, like where you've got things like The Bigger Punch I'm Feeling, Wolfspins I'm Part of It, and King in a Catholic Style, some of those songs are absolutely great. And I think it's the fact that it gets a little bit more faster, like upbeat, like as like it goes on, like is like quite interesting. That's all like way like for it to be structured, like it's a good record because there's always something to look forward to like on it. Like either like the next song is always kind of almost better than like the last one. And in terms of like the album title, Flaunt the Imperfection, I almost can't help but think that it's almost like a kind of like a bit of like an in-joke, because I guess it's like the last thing like on this album like is like any like imperfection. Certainly not from like a kind of technical, kind of musical technical viewpoint, because they've really honed in their craft like on like this album. And I think it's good on this record that they are embracing that kind of sophistication and that kind of perfectionism here, rather than I guess kind of doing it slightly more like half-heartedly, like kind of like sort of going like halfway. Here they go all the way like on that, and I think I think like it's all the better for it. So yeah, that's been my review of Flaunt the Imperfection by China Crisis. So I hope you have enjoyed the review, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.